is Lady Boulay, and I hope you're having a marvelous day. Thank you for your support. Thank you for subscribing to the channel. Thank you for your thumbs up, for your comments, and thank you for sharing the videos. Thank you for all you do to support the channel. And yes, we are commanded to love one another, whether we want to or not, or whether we agree with each other or not. And today, I'm talking about something that we've talked about on this channel a number of times, and that is, why is America afraid of Black history? Well, we already know the answer. Because it makes them look bad. It makes America look bad for a number of reasons. But this article comes from Lonnie Bunch III, who is the director of the African American Museum of History and Culture in Washington, D.C. He wrote this article, and I think it's good for us to hear what he has to say. It is a moving story that he writes. He said, "In all my years doing research at the National Archives, I had never cried. That day in the fall of 2012, I had simply planned to examine documentary material that might help determine how the yet-to-be-built National Museum of African American History and Culture would explore and present the complicated history of American slavery and freedom. As I read through the papers of the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands, the Freedmen's Bureau, as it's usually called, I decided to see if I could find records from Wake County, North Carolina, where I knew some of my own enslaved ancestors had lived. I had few expectations because I knew so little about my family's history. From a surviving wedding certificate of my paternal great-grandparents, I'd gotten the name of my earliest known family member, an enslaved woman named Candace Bunch, my great-great-grandmother. But scrolling through rolls of microfilmed documents from the Raleigh office of the Freedmen's Bureau, I realized the chances were remote that I would find my ancestor. But when I turned my attention to a series of labor contracts designed to give the newly freed some legal protections as they negotiated working relationships with their former enslavers, I found a single page documenting a contract between Fabius A. Perry, who owned the plantation next to the one where my ancestors had been enslaved, and Candace Bunch. That page not only filled a void in my knowledge of my family's history, but also enriched my understanding of myself. So he found in these documents a contract between an enslaver who lived on the plantation next to where his family had been enslaved and his great-great-grandmother. That must have been something. He says, I was amazed at what a single piece of paper could reveal. For 2 days of farm work in 1866, Candace received $1, and for 44 days of work in 1867, she received $11. The contract also revealed that her daughter Dolly was paid $3 for housework. As I read further, the contract delineated what Candace owed Perry for the purchase of cotton and soap. So out of that little bit of money, she had to pay for cotton and soap. What reduced me to tears was the fact that out of her meager earnings, Candace had spent 60 cents on 2 baker tins, more than the payment she received for an entire day's work. I remembered how my paternal grandmother, Leanna Bunch, who resided in Belleville, New Jersey, and died 2 weeks before my 5th birthday, used to bake cookies in the shape of hearts and crescent moons to cajole me into napping. Did she use the very same tins that Candace had labored to buy? Had that been the beginning of a family tradition? No matter how difficult times may be, always help the children find some joy. Well, that is sweet. His grandmother was buying baking tins to bake cookies for her children. Reminds me of my own mother. With this personal discovery came the realization that documents like these from the Freedmen's Bureau, well over 1 million pages, created out of bureaucratic necessity, could help African Americans today better understand themselves and their enslaved ancestors. These records, if made more accessible, could help all of us grasp the challenges, the pain, the losses, the courage, and the resiliency of a people who had both powered and endured the transition from slavery to freedom. They could bring the grand narrative of Reconstruction to a more human scale. I agree with that. The people we encounter in the records of the Freedmen's Bureau call out to be remembered. Their lives, their sacrifices, are stories to be revealed and lauded. Amen. Stories such as these also provoke discomfort and, in some quarters, resistance. Politicians have been elected by sowing fear about divisive history. Is it divisive to point out that African Americans believed in and struggled toward an aspirational America, an America that had made promises but had not yet delivered? No, it's not divisive to us, but it's divisive to them because they don't want us to remember our history. They don't want us to be interested in what happened to our family members because they think that's divisive because it is going to anger some people. It's going to sadden some of us, but it's going to make others angry. And that's what they fear. That's part of what they fear. The hope that freedom would transform a people and a nation was captured in a cartoon by Thomas Nast that appeared in Harper's Weekly on January 24th, 1863. Nast's drawing celebrated the Emancipation Proclamation issued by President Abraham Lincoln a few weeks earlier. The left side of the image depicts the horrific impact of slavery, slave auctions, and the destruction of families, backbreaking labor in the cotton fields, a woman being whipped. On the right, the benefits of slavery, a country at peace, the benefits of freedom, a country at peace, with formerly enslaved children attending school, a black worker drawing fair wages, black and white figures showing mutual respect toward each other. The centerpiece is an image of a black family that has achieved middle-class status with well-clothed children and elders sitting by the hearth. Nast's cartoon looked forward to a future where fairness and freedom were the norm. That was the hope of Reconstruction, and the engine of that hope was the Freedmen's Bureau. On March 3, 1865, after nearly 2 years of debate, Congress passed an act to establish a bureau for the relief of freedmen and refugees, ex-slaves, former slaves. Lincoln signed it into law the same day. The bureau, embedded in the War Department, was one of the first federal forays into social engineering, in some ways anticipating the more activist government policies of the New Deal and the Great Society. Simply put, its charge was to protect the basic rights and help provide for the basic needs of the 4 million people who had been, until recently, enslaved. The value and impact of the Freedmen's Bureau from its inception until it was defunded in 1872 cannot be overstated. At its peak, more than 900 Bureau agents were located throughout the former Confederacy, in rural areas and urban centers. Among other things, these agents documented the violence that was at the core of white Southern resistance to Reconstruction. Let me add that they resisted Reconstruction because they wanted black people back in slavery. The agents responded to and recorded the desire of the formerly enslaved to confirm their marital standing. So see, they wanted to confirm their marital standings. They were married and they wanted those marriages to be recognized. The Bureau agents gave food to the poor and the indigent regardless of race. They helped establish black educational institutions from elementary freedom schools to colleges such as Charlotte University in North Carolina and Howard University in the nation's capital. More than 40 Freedmen's hospitals served the sick, the malnourished, and those whose health had been damaged by the conditions of slavery. During a period when most in the South fought to violently overturn the changes implemented by Reconstruction, the Freedmen's Bureau was one of the few outlets where African Americans could address their needs, obtain legal assistance, and see some evidence that change was at hand. One would argue that the Bureau was, in essence, a form of reparations. Simply by virtue of doing its work, the Freedmen's Bureau amassed records of the stories, hopes, and disappointments of a people on the cusp of freedom. These documents reveal the agency of the newly emancipated. Freedom was not given, but was seized and created by people who made a way out of no way. But the documents underscore how difficult the struggle was. Although they make the efforts of individuals and families visible and concrete, the records also reflect how the promise of Reconstruction was derailed by violence, Northern apathy, and the rise of Jim Crow. Okay? And we know that to be true because we're still living some of that. The documents unlock the names and experiences of people who are often invisible or silent in the conventional telling of history. A significant portion of the Freedmen's Bureau papers reflect the importance of family, of reconnecting with kin separated by the vagaries of slavery, of protecting children. With freedom came an unyielding desire to find oneself by finding those who'd been sold away. The Freedmen Bureau, people hoped, could aid in restoring the bonds of family. In the documents, a freed woman named Senna Smith described how her mother had been sold from Virginia to Tennessee about 18 years past by Colonel Marshall. Smith hoped that her mother, Eliza Williams, whom she was now able to support in her old age, could be found, and noted that she was a member of the Baptist Church in Nashville. Okay, so there was a strong desire to reconnect with family after slavery, and we always hear that in the retelling of family history. He writes a great deal about information that's found in the documents of the Freedmen's Bureau about formerly enslaved people trying to connect with their families, trying to give details of what they last remembered about their families in hopes that the agents could help them. It's very interesting, but I'm going to cut this short. But his ending says, "Why should anyone fear a history that asks a country to live up to its highest ideals, to make good to us the promises in your Constitution," as Frederick Douglass put it. The voices within the Freedmen's Bureau papers demonstrate how the African American fight for access to education, economic opportunity, and basic human rights created paths that benefited all Americans. And that is absolutely the truth. Anytime anything is done by the government to help Black Americans, other people, especially white people, benefit more. Rather than running from this history, we should find in it sustenance, understanding, and hope. In the end, we can't escape the past anyway. What Joe Louis said of an opponent applies to the legacy of history. You can run, but you can't hide. Okay, y'all, that's the end of this part of the letter. There's more, and I will put a link to the letter in the description box so you can go back and read it for yourself. It was very instructive for me to learn how helpful the Freedmen's Bureau was in helping the formerly enslaved people to get on their feet and establish their lives after slavery. So I will put a link to it in the comment section and the description box. Okay, let me know what you think about the video. Thank you for listening. Subscribe to the channel, give me a thumbs up, leave a comment, share the video, and as always, have a great day.